the reason why we have established state-owned enterprises. For example, in many places, to have a healthy competition between state and the private sector has not been taken into account. In my opinion, the state-owned enterprises in many parts of the world have failed because there have a tremendous amount of unwanted political interference. Let me take a simple example from our own country, Sri Lanka. We had a very well-established public transportation system known as Sri Lanka Transport Board. When we privatized Sri Lanka Transport Board, we had bus labor ratio 1 to 134. Whereas the optimal ratio would have been 1 to 6. And the public transportation failed as a result of the privatization of the state-owned. Now it is being again under the state ownership. However, it is pleased to note that the Kerala is having right political will and the commitment to regain the momentum of the state-owned enterprises. Let me look at why we have failed our own state-owned enterprises which we established in the past. In my assessment, we have failed of having our own economic model. I recall when I was an undergraduate in 1980s, we had a subject called comparative economic development, where we were forced to learn the lessons from Great Britain agriculture revolution. And Sri Lanka being a tiny nation, I wonder whether how we would learn lesson from agriculture revolution. It would have been ideal for a country like India. Now, we are in the era of deprivatization. Many privatized state-owned enterprises are being taken over by the state. Sri Lankan experience are quite illustrative. Let me share some of the Sri Lankan examples taking over the privatized state-owned enterprises by the state in the recent past. The first was the Sri Lankan airline, and that was a merger between, it is not really privatization, but we invited the strategic partner, Emirates, to take part in a strategic partnership to make it a viable entity. Finally, we have noted that the Sri Lankan airline is making more losses than that was under state. Now it is being taken by the state. And the Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, it was privatized some 6 years back. That was the pioneering institution for insurance, and the insurance market have become very uncompetitive. Not a single ordinary person could obtain an insurance policy because the entire insurance industry was dominated by the private sector. And also we have noted at the end that the privatization of insurance industry in Sri Lanka make the insurance market very uncompetitive. The government has to take it over. And few months back, we have taken over the Sri Lanka Gas. It was run by the Shell. Now it is run by the government of Sri Lanka. Again, what we have noticed is that keeping the cost of living down, having only privately run gas companies are not healthier. As a result, it was a government decision to privatize. Then again, it was a government decision to take it back. However, what we have noted, the whole discussion what we had since in the morning, running state-owned enterprises effectively, we need to share the experience. What is Government of Kerala, the Department of Industry and Commerce are doing right now. And we also have to work on our own economic models. And we have to revisit the institution that we have set up and the people who have involved in the privatization, and we have to revisit the monitoring and evaluation process that we have adopted in evaluating the performance. Thank you.
The next speaker is Professor Dinesh Ardol, Deputy Director, National Institute of Science, Technology and Development Studies, widely known as NISTADS, New Delhi, India. Dinesh, please.
Thank you, Bala. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades and colleagues. I'm a student of technology policy. I want to draw a few lessons from the experience of the role of state-owned enterprises in technology development and implementation. Few of these lessons are negative ones and others are positive. In fact, the state-owned enterprises-based technology development history is also a long one. In fact, if you look at the experience of latecomer, including India, the state-owned enterprises have played a major role in the development of new technologies or technologies that were at least adapted for the local environments. This is a very important function, and this function requires a long-term policy support. It requires a strategy which cannot be short-term. You cannot actually measure the performance of the state-owned enterprises on the basis of some operational indicators in respect of these goals on short-term basis. In fact, if I look at some of the technologies which are today needed on account of whether energy crisis or climate change, many of these particular technologies, let me take the example of clean coal technologies, were sought to be developed in India as part of the state-owned enterprises. Whether it's Ramagundam or Talcher, the coal-based clean technologies, Dipankar comes from some of those enterprises. They were being incubated as a part of the fertilizer plants or Sindri plant and so on. K.R. Chakravarti and so on, etc., which would have actually saved us a lot of foreign exchange and also allowed us to have a multiplier locally, because it would have been a local resource-based industrial development. Many of these particular technologies, since did not get the long-term policy support, as a result, could not be pursued in a consistent manner. The story is unending, whether it is coal to oil, whether it is coal gasification. I've just taken one example of coal, which is one of the major energy resources which actually we require to use it in electricity and variety of other sectors as an alternative to oil and petroleum, which we import, which actually are responsible for a huge oil bill for this particular country. Today we are wanting to borrow coal to oil technology from South Africa, Sasol. Because Sasol got the long-term policy support and the strategy, they have a technology which Tatas want to buy it. The short point when I'm trying to make is that this long-term strategy and the policy support-based performance indicators are a must if we want the state-owned enterprises to play a role. In fact, if you look around the history of all the new and emerging technologies, which have fueled the growth of capitalism during the decade of 80s and 90s, be IT, internet, mobile telephony, biotechnology, all these technologies actually grew in the womb of or have originated from the capabilities that were being developed within the public sector enterprises or the state-owned enterprises. In fact, many of the technologies just do not come from the capabilities which are sought to be developed in independent autonomous research institutions or universities, but also require the engineering and design experience, which actually comes only when it's a part of a manufacturing or a service operational experience. These two inputs together, which have actually been responsible for most of the new specific technologies which we see today. In fact, if you look at in the 80s, even in India, many of these particular technologies, when they were sought to be mastered, I'm reminded of CMC, the Computer Maintenance Corporation, an organization which we nurtured, which has been now privatized and handed over to Tatas, was well known for its work on e-governance, or computerization of railways, computerization of telecoms, the whole signaling experience development. This could not have been done without the participation of enterprises like CMCs. But we looked at these particular enterprises, CMCs, in terms of, I do not know, even the bottom line was not looked at in the case of the CMC properly, and when it was privatized, when it was sold. It was sold to Tata's. Today, CMC has a very different orientation altogether. It is not participating in the development of technologies which would be appropriate. If you look at the history of much of these particular technologies have developed in the open source environment, in the knowledge commons environment, in the science commons environment. Initially, whether in information technology, biotechnology, none of these technologies had IP on it. In fact, the IP, the strong IP, came much later. As a result, the ecology of the state-owned enterprises was far more conducive to development of these generic technologies which are responsible for multiple applications. So when one actually wants to measure the performance of the state-owned enterprises in terms of what contribution they are likely to make, what contribution they can make, precisely one should start looking at all these particular indicators. The story is very long. I can go on giving examples to it. In fact, if you look at Kerala itself today, it has a huge amount of technological knowledge which it has accumulated over history in the area of herbal medicine. Korea has become world leaders in these particular areas. Kerala too has the potential to do it. Linking of this, this expertise which is diffused, you require an incubator, you require a bridging organization, you require a state-owned enterprises which values technology and technology development. You have had private enterprises, like whether it's Kottakkal or Coimbatore or all these enterprises, but their outlook on technology development and R&D was not the one which actually we have seen across, let's say, today, even in other pharma sectors, which are chemical-based, which are not plant-based. The short point one is trying to make in this particular sector is that the way you evaluate state-owned enterprises, look at them, the kind of niches they are, what they can nurture within their womb, etc., is far more than what can be delivered at any particular point of time in a private sector and even the privatized state enterprises as they are performing, as we have seen now. That's the experience tells us of a country like ours. In fact, one second point which one wants to make in this particular, again, the pathways of development matter. Not only that the state-owned enterprises, if they are beginning to be subjected to now the intellectual property, or they are being subjected to the new public management objectives, the new philosophy, the neoliberal philosophy, rather than actually being seen as instruments of leveraging, bargaining power, development of new pathways, we are going to miss something very important. Let me give you an example of why pathways of development matter. In fact, I was giving you an example of all the new and emerging technologies which developed in the womb of the, whether it's mobile telephony in the womb of the Telenor, whether it is internet in the womb of the defense enterprises, or it is, you look at the BT. 5 minutes is good enough, no problem. When they got linked to actually a new intellectual property environment, IP, which came up in the late 80s, whether the Bayh-Dole Act in the United States or whether it is other forms of strong IP, like which now today are imposed on the all parts of the world, including in Europe and then extending it to the developing world through TRIPS. In fact, when this environment came, you also saw these very technologies becoming source of bubbles. Dot-com bubble of IT is well known. And the BT, the biotechnology, not leading to, in fact, any substantive innovation which would have produced a cheaper drug which could have replaced even chemicals. The short point one is trying to make is this new technologies which grew in the public sector environment, had they been linked to a different pathway of development, like it happened in Cuba, wasn't the corporate biotechnology route. It was the non-corporate biotechnology route and produced the vaccine against meningitis, the whole set of vaccines was the 500 billion. I don't know whether the Cuban ambassador is still around. Not only in the area of health that it has done wonders, but the whole pathway development which is built around the agroecological engineering approach has transformed Cuban agriculture from 89, and the FAO recognizes today, the Food and Agriculture Organization, that Cuban way is the way to feed the world. That is the kind of a transformation which you can see in these technologies which grew in the womb of the public sector, and when they are linked to a different pathway. Today, if you look at the challenges which are there before us, and I'll come to how every part, including Kerala, can contribute to those particular challenges. If you look at climate change challenge, if you look at the ecological and social justice challenge, the whole sustainability challenge of development, inclusive development as it's sometimes called, I'm using the normal words, I'm not. In fact, many of these would require a very different kind of a system, and it cannot be a capitalism. It will have to be something else, but that's a different challenge. But the pathways through which we will have to go very clearly indicate that, for example, if you agroecological engineering approach can be very much in agriculture, and Cuban experience shows it, can be labor intensive, it generates employment, it maintains the ecology, it has a larger multiplier impact, it can be made part of a multi-level planning, and the local economies can build even a larger demand for the state-owned enterprises for innovative technologies. And that's happening in the case of biotechnology. This path of development can be shown that, in fact, the new crops, which actually are going to be far more resilient against climate change, like bamboo. For example, these state-owned enterprises can become actually incubator of new clusters and new institutions over the local economies. If bamboo, coir, or jute, many of these particular crops for which the value-added opportunities can be added, if the consumer products which can be got out of it, there are huge opportunities for a state like Kerala at the moment. I mentioned herbal medicine in this particular case. In fact, these are niches around which, if the systems are to be built, ecologies have been there around for this, meaning the expertise is there in spread out form. The question is, can you find Now the new system organizers. Who are going to be the new system organizer? Do you expect the private enterprises to play that particular role, that function? I don't think in history they have shown that kind of agility. This, which that they will actually have value for the pathway of development which matter to the society. Their bottom line is only calculating money. If you want all these objectives, this is not to say that the commercial objectives are not important. Per se, the operational parameters are not objectives. But the policy, the societal objectives which are to be realized through these commercial objectives can be realized only through when you give a political will, you give a support which actually achieves the longer term objectives for any particular society, for any particular state, that is whether be Kerala or be any other particular state. This is the role of the state-owned enterprises when we reconstruct it. When we build the policy implementation for it, this can be an incubator for a totally new local economy, regional economies, new city systems. In fact, universities and academia can all become part of it, RI. We were here in February in the beginning of this particular year, 2010, and we adopted a IPR policy on the traditional knowledge in order to give a boost to the traditional knowledge. I hope the state-owned enterprises department, the Department of Industry, would actually look at these particular opportunities which are coming in the way and actually look at performance of the state-owned enterprises and its strategic role in totally new way so that a new pathway of development can be constructed which is actually going to give an answer and a far bigger answer to Manmohan Singh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dinesh, for that really spirited talk, almost like our being back at our student days in JNU. Huh? Anyway, our next speaker, who's a discussant, is Mr. Dipankar Mukherjee, who is the Secretary of CITU. Mr. Mukherjee is an engineering graduate and is the All India Secretary of the Centre of Indian Trade Unions, was a former Member of Parliament. For the last 2 decades, he has been in the trade union movement and worked in BHEL, Fertilizer Corporation of India, and other corporations. Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee.
Friends, good evening. You just reminded me of my time limit of 10 minutes. Now that is the exact first and foremost requirement necessary for reconstructing or reviving a sick industry. Time is the essence of revival, and I must say congratulate the ministry, Kerala government and the board that they have gone till to, as I stand there, everything as per the time. Now I presume that when you are talking about the experience, I am talking about national experience of reconstruction. I presume that what we are being hinted at, because that was the whole thing has started, so far as public sector undertakings are concerned. Most of them do not run on profit, they are sick. How to revive them, how to reconstruct them. And when I said the time is the essence of revival, I am not, because my time is limited, I presume that there is no ideological baggage, if that is the word, that whether you want to revive or you don't want to revive. I'll share my experience as the All India level as a trade union leader who has been associated with 6 public sector undertakings for the last 18 to 20 years. And where I had to go to this, Mr. Cherian, the former chairman of Board of Industrial Reconstruction, the body which is supposed to look into this. I had gone to them so many times, I had presented our trade union's case on the revival of these public sector enterprises. So I will share this experience and leave it to you to judge what exactly is the present ruling polity has in mind so far as reconstruction of public sector enterprises are concerned. Number one, what is our experience? I asked, I remember one director from Levity Delight. He had gone for a promotion for Tire Corporation of India, another government public sector undertaking which was sick that time, about 7 to 8 years back. And after this interview, he came to me and told me that I went for that promotion for a chairman. I prepared myself for tire industry and all that, how to revive, it is a sick unit. I was asked only one question. You tell me how to reduce the manpower. A company has a manpower like this, how to reduce the manpower? He said, I had worked in Navy for years, decades together. I knew how to augment the power generation. I knew how to have more capacity utilization. This was not my target, how to reduce the manpower. And the whole thing was targeted only on this. The sick, it is sick. What is the reason? You see, the overhead cost is so, 100%. Wage cost is very high. But no one is telling what is the turnover. It has become sick. If the production is less, zero, the employment cost will be 100%. If instead of feeding 40 people, you give only 10 people's orders, now naturally that will be under capacity utilization, and then what will be the employment cost? So the whole mindset had been the reduction of manpower. The chairman of JNPT is not here. He was talking about employment generation. It was exactly the same point. What is the point? Employment. What is the reconstruction so far as the national issue is concerned? These sick undertakings, profit-making undertakings, employment generation. I give you an example. Mangalore Refinery is a very good company, which was one of the cases where a public sector had taken over that company, Mangalore Oil Refinery. ONGC had taken it over. I was seeing the cost. How do you see the wage cost is? Wage costs. I was shocked. The wage cost for the employees, workers, officers, all, is 3% of the turnover. 3%. The biggest company, this profit-making company I was referring to, ONGC, 16,000 crores profit. Its wage cost is hardly 5%. BHL, it is hardly 7 to 8%. I asked, what is the problem? What is the point? The whole point is that is another